This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party, as well as being the County Chair out in Suffolk County on Long Island. With us, our good friend, esteemed colleague, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, gentlemen, the two issues that I want to start off the show on. One, I want to talk about bye-bye Biden, or burden. That may be a Freudian slip. And welcome back.
Now unburdened.
Or unburdened, that's correct. Welcome back, President Trump. So these are my views, and then I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen. Okay. Biden, as far as I'm concerned, may well be the worst president in American history. I think in many ways he may be one of the most corrupt presidents in American history. His record is of failure, fraud, weakness, and division. A man who committed himself to unite the country, divided this country. He showed weakness at home and abroad. He allowed the crazy left and the woke left and the radical environmentalists to dominate the agenda. So fundamentally, he was controlled by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, not two good people in terms of protecting the national interest, whether domestically or in foreign affairs.
And Barack Obama.
Okay, so what does he do? He issues, now I was given a number last night when I was on Katz and Cosby, and I haven't verified this number, Jesse and Eric, but I'm told he gave pardons in the thousands. Somebody was banting around the number 8,000 pardons. It was the first I had heard about that, but it's clearly in the thousands. Let me tell you, it was not vetted because there's a process in the Justice Department. There's a whole office that's supposed to vet applications for pardons. After they're vetted with a recommendation that goes over the White House counsel's office, and that White House counsel is supposed to review it personally with the president, and then they do it, okay? People who are rapists, killers, drug dealers, arsonists, terrorists, cartel members, they were all given pardons by Biden.
And many of them didn't even ask for it.
No, right.
They didn't even ask for it.
Right. It's a disgrace. And then, of course, he takes the card down to the Capitol with Trump, and he never mentions to Trump that he's pardoned his members of his family. The reason to pardon your members of your family is they're allegedly co-conspirators with him in the fraud and the selling out of America because of economic gain of the Biden family enterprises. So why was that important? Because that way they can't be prosecuted, and they have this grant of immunity from 2014 onwards. That doesn't protect them from being called in by a grand jury for an investigation. It doesn't protect them from having to testify before Congress because they have Fifth Amendment protections. And if they conduct themselves in a lying way, that they can be charged with obstruction or with perjury. Okay. So that's Biden. And I'm even Axelrod, who is Obama's part of Obama's brain trust, even he thought it was a disgrace, and a lot of Democrats thought so as well. Now, let me move back to Trump, and then I'm going to turn it over first to Eric, then to Jesse. Trump. I think Trump has done a lot of good things this week, and we'll go into more detail as the show goes on. I think his precision in the federal agencies of these departments with diversity, equity, and inclusion is wonderful. You judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. You don't have affirmative action, hiring, quotas. You do stuff on the merits. You have to protect America by having the best and the brightest. And you don't want to have a brain surgeon who's not qualified to operate. And you don't want people running the State Department, Defense Department, the CIA, the FBI, the FAA, or any other agency who's not qualified to do the job. You had a totally unqualified human being vice president of the United States, a heartbeat away from presidency, and how did that work out? But Trump, what has Trump done wrong, in my opinion? He's been good on blowing away DEI. He's been good about rescinding the obsession with climate change and making America economically and environmentally and energy dependent rather than having the power it needs to both be a powerhouse economically as well as to protect our national security. But he goes on Sean Hannity, and he says he doesn't know what the big deal about TikTok is. Well, all due respect about TikTok, the big deal is Congress passed a law, it was signed by the President of the United States. It's good law. They had 90 days. It was to be closed down on past Sunday, and they had 90 days to have a real deal on the table that was being negotiated. It didn't have to be a final deal, but it had to be a real deal. It wasn't an invitation to go out there and find a white knight to do a deal. Trump issued an executive order. In my humble opinion, he's over the line on that executive order. So that's TikTok. Again, he did a wholesale bunch of pardons. The argument being, well, Biden did it, so I can do it for January 6th. There are allegations, I don't know the facts, the allegations that some people who assaulted police were part of that pardon group. I've also heard there were 80 people who were singled out who have to have their situation reviewed. I would hope Trump would have the good common sense and decency to separate out anybody who assaulted anybody in law enforcement, period. Okay. So, having said that is my introduction to you two gentlemen. Eric, you go first, then return to Jesse.
Well, to your point about whether or not Joe Biden is the worst president in American history, I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but he's certainly in the top 2 or 3. But once you're always in the conversation when you're debating who's the worst president of all time,
not a good place.
You're not a good place to be. You've pretty much etched your place in American history. May not have been the worst, but you're certainly in the top 2 or 3. In terms of other things that he's, in terms of the transfer over to Trump, on the positive side, I think I would describe the Trump administration so far is one that asserts sovereignty, deregulation, and common sense. So in terms of sovereignty, securing the border was the number one issue for most Americans. We have to secure the border. He's doing that. He's sending down troops to help to secure the border. He's arresting illegal aliens who have committed crimes here, criminals, and deporting them. That helps assert our sovereignty. He has sanctioned the International Criminal Court. That's that bastard organization that has sent out arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant, even though it violated every law and every rule and every provision of the ICC. It was just a way to undermine Israel and to attack Israel, delegitimize it in an effort to try and destroy it. So Trump has sanctioned the ICC and those who work at the ICC who are responsible for those arrest warrants. He's making us energy independent. The drill, baby, drill isn't just a matter of, we really want to use our energy. It's really about America being energy independent and being a net energy exporter. That is critical for our national security. It helps our sovereignty. When he's talking about what's going on in the Panama Canal, that's not just because he wants to be petulant about the Panama Canal. Maybe I would describe it a little bit differently. But he's 100% right that when we gave back the Panama Canal, and I happen to agree, I think it was a mistake to give it back. But once we had done that, we gave it back to Panama, and he correctly points out now China operates the ports on either side of the Panama Canal, in the Atlantic and the Pacific. And in the event of a confrontation between the United States and China, closing down that waterway would undermine American national security. China can't be in charge of that. Rebuilding the military. He's dedicated to rebuilding the military that Barack Obama started to gut and Joe Biden continued to gut. So peace through strength requires strength. It requires rebuilding the military. So that's just kind of on the sovereignty side. But these things overlap. One of the things about the ICC, I just want to come back to that for a second. It's not that they sanctioned us, but the fact that they sanctioned Israel, which was not a member state, and they filed the advice or they filed the complaint of the state of Palestine, which doesn't exist. That just means that if somebody else wants to assert a claim against the president of the United States or an American officer or an American elected official by the ICC, they just willy-nilly decide for themselves that they can issue an arrest warrant. So it attacks American national security. So those things, there are other examples, but those are examples of the sovereignty piece of the Trump agenda. On the deregulation, if you want to function as a nation, you can't have these burdens placed on you by state, local, and the federal government. It makes it impossible to function. Let's see what happens in California after these fires. Putting aside from the fact that they want to blame climate change for the fires, even if you accept that as true, that climate change is responsible for the fires, Climate change is not responsible for the decision to divert waters not to go into the Pacific rather than into reservoirs that could be used to go into fire hydrants. Climate change does not explain why the regulated insurance companies out of the state so that hundreds or if not thousands of homeowners who have lost their homes no longer have fire insurance and can't rebuild. This is all a part of regulation. And then when you want to rebuild, all the zoning requirements and all the rules and regulations that are in place, that's going to make something that's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars to rebuild, cost hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild because of these regulations. Trump is wedded to deregulating. That's how you get an economy going. That's how you make government responsive. And that's just one example. And then on the common sense agenda, Richard, you touched on it. I agree with you 100%. Getting rid of diversity, equity, inclusion. Stop viewing everything through the lens of race and gender, and making it a meritocracy, and not pitting American against American, and telling young children that they're evil simply because they're white male and Jewish. Just everything. Everyone should get the exact same opportunity. It's all about equal opportunity. And if a state, local government, or the federal government, for whatever reason, is not providing an equal opportunity, it's up to the Justice Department or elected officials to make sure that there is these equal opportunities. So, as I said, sovereignty, deregulation, and common sense.
Jesse, your thoughts?
Well, Judge, I think you have to agree with me here that the way Eric just described this, he was secretly always with Trump. He just wanted to let us think and attract some ratings by saying maybe Trump wasn't his first choice.
Well, I got cut off before I got to the January 6th and TikTok. So.
I knew what I was doing. I was turning over to you, Jesse. Go.
Honestly, I think both of you have said it well. I just want to remind our listeners, though, what we're seeing here should be nothing new. It shouldn't be a surprise, even though the left is claiming it's a surprise. The mainstream media that has gotten everything wrong over the last 9 years is still getting it wrong. You know, they're calling it a surprise. The president campaigned on these exact items. Everything from the J6 pardons to removing classified clearances for people who signed a letter that we know was a political tool used 3 days later in the 2020 elections regarding the Hunter Biden laptop by then candidate Joe Biden, and was debunked as fact that the Department of Justice knew as late as, I think, maybe 2018 or 2019 that the Russians had nothing to do with it. We should not be surprised with his actions. In fact, we should be championing them. In moving forward, in coming in as a disruptor, in coming in with a common sense agenda, you're going to break a couple of eggs to get this country moving in the direction in which its founding fathers and the people of this country voted overwhelmingly for, and whether it be in battleground states, whether it be in the Electoral College, or a couple of million in the popular vote. There are certain things you can disagree with. I do think that if anybody raises their hands to a police officer or a law enforcement officer, I don't believe that person should be subject to a pardon. I'm hoping that those people are those that maybe are part of the 80 that are in review.
No, but we know that even some of the Proud Boys who assaulted police officers have been pardoned. I mean, I agree with JD, and I happen to agree with JD Vance on this one. The week before Trump issued the pardon, JD Vance said that he did not think that anyone who was assaulted a police officer was deserving of a pardon. I agree with Vance on that. I don't think I think it was a mistake for Trump to pardon him, and it's going to come back and bite him in the tuchus.
And by the way,
I believe it may come back to bite. Also on TikTok, I completely agree. I think that the law is the law. I believe that executive order is an overreach. However, with that being said, one of the things you can't describe him as is he's been a relatively successful businessman. By the actions taken by the government, by the United States, it's almost going to devalue who was going to come in and actually purchase for its proper price TikTok. But as he was said on Hannity, I understand his thought process here. And let's be honest, he's honest about his change in his approach to TikTok. In August of 2020, he issued an executive order as president to limit the U.S. government involvement with TikTok and its personnel of TikTok. It was over those 4 or 5 years that transpired, where it became a tool for him to communicate with the next generation, the youth voters. And that's where I think the politics and the government are going to have to mix in such. Maybe that 75-day, I believe it's a 75-day pause, is the way to do that so that there could be someone that comes in here because he is responding to his constituents. But I do agree. I don't believe an executive order supersedes a law signed passed by both chambers and also signed by the then President Joe Biden. Going back to what you both said, I think that Joe Biden has surpassed
Buchanan.
Certainly Jimmy Carter as being the worst president that in our nation's country.
Remember,
nation's history.
Buchanan actually advocated for the South to secede, so that's pretty awful.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, I agree with you on that. But I mean, listen, I'm 58, almost 59. I remember Jimmy Carter. I don't remember Buchanan. But
only Richard remembers.
So excuse me, Buchanan and I used to go bowling together every Tuesday night.
Yeah, but if you're ever even mentioned in the discussion, you know that you either got the gold, the silver, or the bronze, and that can change at any time, like a college football or a college basketball ranking there. But one thing I think that is indisputable, it's indisputable by his own acts, is that Joe Biden's administration and his tenure, especially late in his public service career, will go down as one of the most corrupt enterprises that has been engaged here in the U.S. government. I remember listening to him and Kamala Harris stare at the CNN cameras and tell America that he thinks it's a mistake to say when Donald Trump floated preemptive pardons for his family. Donald Trump never issued pardons for his family. Now, whether that was floated or whether it wasn't, still, he never did. Joe Biden did do that. And then the pardons he issued for the J6 Unselect Committee, which was a one-sided partisan committee appointed by the Democratic Speaker with never Trumpers on there representing them, they all of a sudden have these pardons. So that's almost an admission of guilt. Fauci, going back to 2014, now let's remember, I believe it was back about 2013, 2014, when then President Obama signed a law that stopped the type of funding and exploration or examination by U.S. governments of some of the diseases and some of the issues that Fauci was
he funded it. You're right, Jesse. He funded it surreptitiously.
Exactly.
He just moved it from one program to another, and he finagled it. And what do we get? We got a lab leak, which of course they denied, from China, our enemy, and China stopped the flights internally, but let them fly all over the world. And how many millions of people lost their lives or health was destroyed? So there's a lot of blood on the hands of these people.
Absolutely.
A lot of blood on the
lives are on these people. And here's the other thing, and I'll conclude with these two things, is that by those actions, on top of the last minute, 19 minutes before his presidency ended, pardon of his family, which I really do think it was directed at one or two. He was just hiding it by making it 5 or 6 people. Is that? Oh, what was my chain of thought? He basically has confirmed that his operations were corrupt and such. I would not have, if I was him, I would not have told President Trump, and I'm glad he didn't tell President Trump.
Trump would have said something during his speech.
Exactly. He was going to be giving a very important speech. And you know what? Any man would be distracted by the disappointment, by the gall that this would have had. I know it would have affected me if I was making a very important speech. So I'm glad he did not say that. And you know what? It's just
he may have just forgotten.
Yeah, he may have just
whatever Joe or his sister told him to sign.
Yeah. That's true. But also the J6 pardons that went up there, and by both men. First, the Unselect Committee that was partisan, and by President Trump. The thing is, are we ever really going to get to the truth? Because all those documents have been destroyed. Everything that Select Committee, what they hid and what they released, is now basically unobtainable. So obviously there was a concern that there was something going forward here in that committee. And I know that the Oversight Committee, the Republican-led Oversight Committee, had shed a light on a lot of that information that was withheld from the public. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever really know who were truly the bad guys, who were truly the just innocent bystanders that got caught up in a moment. But we do know other things. There were 26 confidential informants from the FBI in that group, and there were Antifa adjutants in that group on January 6th of 2021 that were doing nefarious activity. So
we also know that there were people in that building assaulting law enforcement officials who are not deserving. Okay. Who are not deserving.
Okay, to close out this segment, I just want to point out to Jesse and to Eric. Late yesterday, Speaker Johnson announced that they were appointing a special select committee or subcommittee on the issue to investigate the January 6th issues. What led up to it,
good for him.
What happened, and what happened after. Just so you know, what led up to it, what happened after, and we'll see.
A commission on the commission.
Exactly. So,
let's have a commission to look into that.
I so ordered. Gentlemen, we have to take
the Democratic Politburo basically running the first investigation.
Exactly.
No kidding. I couldn't agree with that more. All right, so this is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Stay with us. We'll be back in just but a few moments for more interesting and important conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Greg Kelly here with an urgent retirement warning. President Trump's return is set to usher in a new golden age. But growing trade tensions and China's ruthless attack on the dollar have rattled the markets. That's why Warren Buffett just dumped $133 billion in stocks. And so too have Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, and even Jamie Dimon, CEO of the world's largest bank. That's why thousands of informed IRA and 401k savers are now shielding their savings with gold. And the experts at Colonial Metals Group are the only folks I trust to help you to do the exact same thing, especially now after Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki warned of a coming market crash. So visit freegoldguide.com/Kelly or call 800-655-5186. You'll get a free gold guide on how to bulletproof your wealth with gold tax-free. Plus, see if you qualify for a free home safe and as much as $7,500 in free silver. Once again, that's freegoldguide.com/Kelly.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today. Did you know that hunger affects thousands of our neighbors? Right here in Nassau and Suffolk counties, Long Island Cares, funded by the legendary Harry Chapin, is dedicated to changing that. They partner with nearly 400 agencies to provide food, education, and support those in need. Visit licares.org to see how you can help. Through donations, volunteerism, or corporate partnerships, your support is critical. Go to licares.org today and be part of the solution. No one should go hungry. That's licares.org.
Think about how much time you spend at home. Does your home really make you feel great? If not, it's time to change it. Now picture yourself coming home, seeing beautiful new furniture from Jordan's. Eating out or a vacation, those things just come and go. But walking into your room and loving what you see, you'll enjoy that every day. Right now, come to Jordan's Furniture and get 15% off everything or get up to 60 months with no interest.
Call 1-866-245-4722 for financing details. Restrictions apply. Subject to credit approval.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Switching gears, gentlemen, one of the biggest threats, as we talked just briefly in the first segment about, was the illegal migrant crisis and our unsafe border, and what must be done about this. Now, there's a context to this, and it's a simple context, and it's not too complicated. It's a matter of national security, and it's a matter of constitutional and statutory law. No country can be deemed a country unless it has safe borders. You cannot allow people to walk in your country uninvited, not going through the legal process. So when people say, well, it's not a crime to cross the border without permission or authorization, they're wrong. It is a violation of law. It's a criminal offense. Okay? It's not a civil matter. It's not a no big deal matter. It is a criminal offense to come into this country without authorization and permits to come in and going through a legal process. And the President of the United States, Biden at the time, let people wave through and gave them appearance tickets for 7, 8 years out. He had no right to do that because that's totally contrary to the statutes, the immigration statutes. They had to be outside and had to wait their turn to come in to be examined and have a hearing outside the borders of the United States. So they got flooded with millions and millions of people, unvetted, cartel members, Chinese nationalists of military age, terrorists from the Middle East, all coming in. Terrible, dangerous. People lost their lives. Women were raped. People were tortured. Gangs came in. The Venezuelan gangs came in, one of the most notorious gangs in the world, came in and set up operations throughout America, all over, all because of Biden doing this. It's absolutely awful. So we have a new leader, a new border czar. His name is Tom Homan. We know Tom. He's been on Cass and Cosby a number of times. We've talked to him over the years. This is a man with the brains, the courage, the ability to get things done. So what has he been doing? He's doing roundups of these illegal migrants. He's focusing first on the ones with the criminal records or the ones who've committed crimes in the United States. But ultimately, they all have to be removed because they're all in violation of law. But you have to triage this. You have to prioritize it. Go after the people who committed crimes here and go after the people who had criminal records who never should have been in here in the first place. That's very, very important. And you have executive orders as well as legislation that's going through the Congress now to arm the federal government with the ability to get people out because, as Trump correctly says, this is an invasion. We've been saying it for years on WABC. This is an invasion. This is not a random act of a few people coming over. This is in the millions and millions and millions. So what must be done? Round them up. Get them out of here. Now, if they've committed criminal acts while they're here, you know what I say? Let them do their jail time first, and then you get them out of here. I'm not a big fan of just deporting somebody who's raped a woman or murdered somebody who's been engaged in armed robbery or drug trafficking or sexual trafficking and giving a free pass, sending them back to some banana republic somewhere. No, let them do their jail time. If they're convicted, after that's over, then you deport them. Eric, your thoughts?
I agree with most of that. I think one of the things that Holman is talking about, which I encourage him to do, is to prosecute elected officials who get in the way of ICE and other legitimate federal organizations that are doing their job.
Title 18, United States Code, Section 2.
Correct. And so if you're the mayor of Chicago, you don't have the right to break the law. If you're the mayor of Denver, you don't have the right to break the law. And if you are harboring a criminal, then you should be prosecuted for harboring a criminal. If you get in the way of a federal official, law enforcement official, from doing their job, you should be prosecuted. And I think perhaps that the United States, the federal government, should be withholding all federal funding from sanctuary states and cities unless and until they start complying with the law. I think where we part company a little bit, though, is on the DACA kids. Children who came here, people who came here when they were children, who have known no other country, have been law-abiding citizens, have been productive citizens, many of whom have served in the military. The idea that should not be allowed to become citizens, I'm sorry, I find that anathema.
I didn't say that. I have no disagreement with you.
Okay. So I don't think we should lose sight of the DACA kids. I think they should become citizens. And given them, but we agree 100% on people who came here and committed a crime. And of course, coming across illegally is a crime itself. But once you've come here and you've committed a crime, I agree you should be first prosecuted, sentenced, and do your time and then deported. If you committed a crime before you came here, you just kick them out. I am all for that. But we're talking about the magnitude of the number of illegal aliens here. We can't use every resource we have to force them all out. So if some people have come here illegally, but they've been productive citizens, And again, if some of them may have served in the military. But so what they should do is they should pay a penalty, pay back taxes. They should not be allowed ever to become citizens. But there's a practical reason here as well. We're going to have a Social Security and Medicare crisis. We're not going to have enough people funding Social Security and Medicare for Social Security and Medicare to survive. So if somebody's come here illegally, but that's the only crime they've ever committed, and they've otherwise been good residents in the United States, hard workers, honest, they should, I think, be allowed to stay, but pay back taxes, pay a penalty, but not become citizens. And those taxes are going to benefit retirees. We just don't have enough people working to support retirees on Social Security and Medicare. So I think we should give some thought to that.
Okay. Jesse, your thoughts?
I can't believe that anybody would have a discussion or a debate that a criminal, either a crime committed here in the United States or abroad before they came into the country and came into the country illegal, should not be deported immediately. In fact, some of the reports are that the ICE agents have been operating in cities like Boston and others and have already arrested and have targeted a number of somewhere north of 350 illegal immigrants that have criminal records. The fact that the CPD app has been canceled and whatever that may impact falls on the Biden administration.
Yeah. Jesse, explain what that app is, please.
That app basically gave an illegal migrant or illegal immigrant, whether you were a terrorist or cartel being trafficked or whatnot, when you cross the border, you can just sign on to an app to be allowed into this country, basically registered. There's no fingerprinting. There's no other background check. That was it. And there were many that ended at 1 o'clock on the 20th of 2025, once the president took his oath of office. So what we're seeing here is the execution of a plan that has been put forth by the administration to the American people, and that has been overwhelmingly supported by the American people. We've returned all of the Trump era executive orders to secure the northern border. We're sending troops, 1,500 of National Guard and troops to the southern border.
The number might be as high as 10,000, I read.
Exactly. But I think right now we started with 1,500, and we're also monitoring the northern border, whether that be through economic policy, foreign policy with tariffs. But let's also not forget something that's really important here. The naming of cartels in Mexico as a terrorist group.
A foreign terrorist organization. That's good. That was a terrific thing to do. That was a terrific thing to do.
Did not even see that coming. I don't even know if he mentioned it in anywhere, but that in itself is something that puts another tool in the hands of American law enforcement to protect our borders. And it really is going to strike at the heart of the cartels that not just traffic their own drugs. They traffic fentanyl created in China. They are involved in human trafficking. Cartels, as the American people know, are everywhere, in almost every neighborhood. Their impact is felt in every neighborhood of America. And this is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. They have as much money, dark money, hidden money. They have politicians in their back pockets. They have former politicians in their back pockets doing their bidding, as much as any mega corporation that there is, whether you're Microsoft or GMC or anybody else, not to make them all together.
And they don't pay taxes on it. And they don't pay taxes. So that means it's real money.
Really? They don't,
the American people.
It's the law. They're supposed to pay tax. I'm shocked.
The Al Capone rule. Exactly. Get them on tax evasion.
Exactly.
Where's the lady in the red dress?
Eric. It was a good movie. He enjoyed the movie until after.
So
right, go ahead.
Just a couple other points I want to make. So some of the people who don't support or are against deporting some of these the criminal elements and the illegal aliens, they make the argument you're going to separate families. Well, if you're an American family and somebody in your family breaks the law, they go to jail. right?
So the family separated.
And the private family separated.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure why someone comes here as an illegal alien somehow gets special treatment. To that point, another example. There was recently, I think it was last week, I think I saw it on Channel 5. There was this huge fire in the Bronx, destroyed a couple of apartment buildings. And these are all American citizens, New York residents, and their homes were completely uninhabitable. So the city put them up in hotels for a period of time. I think it was 30 days. I'm not sure exactly how many. It's irrelevant for this point. And then after they were in the hotels, they were then shuffled over to a shelter for a period of time. And these are families, and then once so they're in the shelters for a period of time. And if the home is not rebuilt in time, then they're out on the street unless they have the money to go live somewhere else. These are American citizens. But if you came illegally and you found your way to New York, the right to shelter law gives you home. It gives you a nice hotel room. It gives you food. They're treated better than American citizens, and we wonder why we're running out of money. And the final point I'd make on this is everyone's saying, "Oh, asylum. We have to give people asylum, because it's compassionate." Well, first, I mean, the argument that it's not compassionate to cause people to make this trip is 100% correct. But on top of that, under international law, once you leave your country where you believe that it is unsafe, say you leave Nicaragua or you leave Venezuela, and then you find yourself in a country, the first country you transit where your life is no longer threatened, let's say Mexico.
That ends the game.
You no longer have a right to keep going and have asylum in the United States. But somehow that law just got lost in the sauce.
Deliberately.
Of course it was deliberately. So there's a real ideological battle going on here. Unfortunately, the ideology of common sense on securing the border is winning out now.
All right, Jesse, I want to ask. We have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you your thoughts on this. Trump correctly has issued these mandates against these executive orders against wokeism and federal authorities, and in essence is attacking the cancel culture and DEI, and hopefully is sending an instructive message to states and companies. But the fact of the matter is, just because he's going after it in federal agencies, the DEI and wokeism and that kind of nonsense, that doesn't mean the blue states and the blue cities can't do it on their own. So the battle is far from won. What are your thoughts about that?
The battle is far from won, but I think that we have taken one huge, significant step in that battle. We are now directing our Department of Defense and our U.S. Armed Forces to be warfighters, not people who are worried about DEI. We are now returning American enterprise, American hiring back to a meritocracy as opposed to a divisive issue like DEI. Let's be honest. This was something that came out of the far left progressive agenda because they want the state to control everything. They want a class system here in the United States. They don't want someone to lift up from their life from their bootstraps and be the next entrepreneur, be the next creator or innovator of Tesla or Microsoft or Apple or Facebook or any of these other new technologies. They want to keep people under control. And that's what DEI did. It did not help minorities. It actually divided this country. And that's why he is going to go down as the divider in chief, Joe Biden, because he never looked to bring us together. He never wanted us to do a good, hard day's work. He wanted the government to control him. Now, the fact that the federal government has started that and is now going to try and impose this and work with the private industry. Many of our private industry companies have already rejected, even before Trump took the oath of office, but certainly thereafter have abandoned their DEI initiatives. They were failures. They didn't give you the best employees. They actually shut out a large significant of the workforce, and it really did not create a merit-based system within their own corporations for growth. It was like the ultimate, shuttle game back and forth. I think it's going to help. We have to start somewhere. The fact that we have war fighters now and not, DEI monitors in the Department of Justice and in our armed forces is, for me, first and foremost, the most important element of this, because that's what we need to protect our homeland. The other part of this is that voters are seeing that. Now, am I disappointed? Just recently, I read in our local newspaper that Siena College did a survey of somewhere of about 300 kids on Long Island, and about 30% of them said that they're going to keep their DEI initiatives. That's their choice. That's their choice, but that's their choice to be a stagnant business, a stagnant industry, and not allow and reward hard work, innovation, and the entrepreneurial spirit that we need to grow companies and grow this country and our economy.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you, Jesse. I don't know that it is their choice. I think it's unconstitutional.
I think that it is illegal under federal civil rights.
It violates the Fifth Amendment.
You know what? That's right. Because I'm sorry, Eric. I'm glad you said that because the new.
What about me? I said it too.
Civil rights,
I said it too.
But you didn't make the right hand motion when you said it. Yeah, I think it violates the Fifth and the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Acts of the 1960s.
There you go. All right, Ava just gave us the signal.
They're lawyers. You guys know better than
That's right. 2-1, Jesse. I apologize.
You got it.
All right, this is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments with the final segment of this week's show. We'll be right back.
This is Let the Record Show. This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I want to switch gears, gentlemen. I want to talk about this deal, which Alan Dershowitz, and I have borrowed the expression from him, it's not a deal, it was extortion. But there's a deal going on between Israel and Hamas. It was put together by Biden back in May. It was accepted by Israel with a gun to the head because they were cutting off supplies of military equipment. It was pushed at the end because Trump said if hostages are not coming out on the day I'm inaugurated, they'll be hell to pay. I think the danger is that this is a dangerous deal. I said this last week when Jesse and Eric and I talked about this. I've only been more confirmed in the week that's passed that it's a dangerous deal because what did I see when you had these three young women being released? I saw Hamas in control of the streets of Gaza, being supported by a populace. I saw Hamas coming out of the tunnels, which were supposed to have been eradicated. I see them in control of governmental operations. This is a very big deal. As I've said repeatedly on this show and other shows I've been on, when your enemy tells you you're going to keep coming back and back and back and back until they destroy you, believe them. When your enemy tells you their agenda is to destroy you, and they have both political and religious edicts to support the destruction of the state of Israel and extermination of the Jewish people in Israel, believe them. There's going to come a time that we're going to regret this deal. Do I want the hostages back? Of course I do. But when you yank hostages and you hold them for ransom and you get a ransom back, you only encourage more hostage taking. And that's the problem. That's what's going to be going on again. And as we know, Sinwar, after having brain surgery, cancer surgery, from Jewish doctors in Israel to save that son of a bitch's life, came back and destroyed all those folks on October 7th, tortured them, babies wouldn't put in ovens, throats was slit. It was awful. It was awful. And these people will never be the same. These hostages will even be released. Their lives are broken. Their minds will be broken for the rest of their lives. The trauma to the state of Israel and its people is awful. You cannot allow these people to survive. They have to be confronted. They have to be dealt with. And as Pete Hegseth has made clear, as Mike Waltz has made clear, as Marco Rubio has made clear, three great national security and foreign policy choices, they've all made clear Hamas has to be eliminated from power, And if it was up to Hegseth, God bless him, they'd be eliminated from the face of this earth. Eric.
Yes, I think on this one we disagree. Look, do we want to release these murderers that were in Israeli prisons? These weren't hostages Israelis were holding. These were people that are doing life. Many of them are life sentence for having murdered Israelis. But I think it's important that we keep in mind a few things. First is it's a 3-phase deal. It's not just one deal. The deal's in 3 phases. First phase is the Israelis get back 33 hostages over a 42-day period, and they release around 1,000 of these other people, these prisoners. But at the end of the first phase, the Israelis maintain control militarily. They have a buffer zone along the eastern Gaza that divides Israel from Gaza, but the buffer's inside Gaza. And they have a buffer over in southern Gaza over the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Egypt and Gaza. And as you correctly point out, the Israelis have said Hamas will not control or govern in the west in Gaza. Trump has said it. Rubio has said it. Hegseth has said it, and Michael Waltz has said it. So when you get to phase 2, when you're talking about military, the Israelis potentially leaving Gaza, the one thing the Israelis never gave up in this deal at any point was the right to continue the war. They can go back and fight any time Hamas breaks the deal or the deal falls apart. And when you get into phase 2 and you start talking about security arrangements for Israel, there's no way the Israelis are ever going to agree that Hamas is going to be in control or going to run Gaza. Here's the sad fact.
But where do they go, Eric? Where do they go? Physically, where do these clowns go?
Who, Hamas?
Yeah.
But they're going to have the Israelis will go back to war and they will hunt them down.
No. I mean, literally, where are they physically going to be? You have hundreds, maybe thousands of these fighters, these terrorists. Where are they going to go? You're going to allow Egypt doesn't want them. Jordan doesn't want them. You can't put them in the West Bank.
I'm not making myself clear if you're making that point. Israel will go back to war. Israel will continue to prosecute the war. They've never given up the right to prosecute the war. They will murder these bastards. They will kill them. That's what they're going to have to do. Here's the sad fact we're all going to have to get our arms around. This deal is not going to go 3 phases. The Israelis are not going to get back all these hostages. It's a sad fact. But if they are wedded to the proposition, and they should be and must be, that Hamas cannot survive as a military or governmental body that's going to govern or rule in Gaza, the Israelis are going to have to go back to war, and Hamas is never going to give up all those hostages. But after phase 1, as you enter phase 2, this deal is going to fall apart. But the single most important point about this is we're missing the main point. This is not about Hamas. This is about Iran.
Agreed.
This is all about Iran.
Agreed.
And if there's a side arrangement between the Trump administration and the Israelis, where either A, the Trump administration will say, we're going to give you everything you need to go attack the Iranian nuclear facilities, or B, which I think would be preferable, the United States agreed that we, along with the Israelis and perhaps maybe the Saudis and the UAE, will attack the Iranian nuclear facilities. Because even if you kill every single Hamas terrorist, if this regime in Iran survives, this cycle's just going to happen again.
Agreed.
The ones that have to go are Iran. That's where Israel has to start redirecting their attention. And if they have all these troops inside Gaza, which they ultimately probably will have to go back to, then they're taking their eye off the ball, which is in Tehran. They've neutered, literally and figuratively, Hezbollah. The Houthis are now back on their heels. Trump, to his credit, has redesignated them as a foreign terrorist organization. And the Israelis really haven't, other than giving up and turning over these, the prisoners, many of whom, as I said, are serving life sentences for murdering Israelis, which is a very high price to pay. But the key that everybody must keep in mind, Israel has never agreed, and the United States supports them in this, that they will not continue to prosecute the war if Hamas breaches the agreement or they can't make a security arrangement, which by definition they're not going to be able to do because you can't make that. Hamas is never going to negotiate itself out of existence. Israel will go back to war. So in 42 days, the Israeli military will have a little respite, and then they'll go back to war. But in the meantime, they got to keep their eye on the prize in Tehran.
I agree with that. So, Jesse, solve this problem for us. What do you think?
You're the only one who can do it.
I think that, listen, you have to trust. I live by an old adage when we're dealing in politics, you got to trust the guy in the room. And the guy in the room is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who held off on this deal since May, but was convinced because he did not trust the person that was in the room with him, and that was Joe Biden.
Trust
in the United States.
Well, remember Reagan, trust but verify.
Exactly. But now, and I think this deal changed. Number one, through language and the foreign policy through that, the words of Donald Trump that said they'll be held to pay if these hostages are not released. I agree. I don't believe that we're going to see 3 phases of this war. I don't believe we're going to see the conclusion of 2 phases of this war. It's going of this piece of the ceasefire. It's going to collapse somewhere shortly thereafter. Phase 1.
It's a pause. It's not a ceasefire. It's a pause.
It's a pause. Exactly. I do trust Netanyahu, and you got to remember that he now has a full partner with Donald Trump in the United States, who is locked shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with Israel. And the 3 of us are right, and I believe everyone really truly sees the full board. The full board is not Hamas. The full board includes Tehran and Iran. They are far more vulnerable. The situation on the ground has changed for them. Syria's collapsed. We've talked about neutered Hezbollah. We had the Houthis now been addressed. Hamas has been gutted, still there, but still has been hurt far more significantly. Tehran is the target. Tehran is the source of all of these fundings. It's the source of all this evil. But now we have a president and the United States that's not afraid to enter into this. It's going to acknowledge what their allies in the Arab nations in the Middle East have said. Saudi Arabia, other nations, Egypt, they want the elimination of that rogue state of Iran to take place. And now we have 2 full-fledged partners, the United States and Israel, to carry that out. And again, this pause is probably going to help the Israeli government and the Israeli armed forces. But also, you have to also put yourself in Netanyahu's shoes. I believe it was one we discussed last week. 60% of the Israelis in Israel supported this ceasefire.
It's closer to 70 now, from what I hear.
It's close to 70 now. Yeah. There's a little bit of a political situation here. When you're tipping at 60, 70, politicians need to pay attention, and they sometimes need to adapt to the will of the people. That's what happened in a different case. Remember, Mario Cuomo knew better than every New Yorker. He opposed capital punishment and the death penalty. Let 70% of the people of New York wanted a death penalty, and his term came to an end at the hands of George Pataki on that single issue. So is this a perfect ceasefire deal? No. Does it prevent Israel from prosecuting this war? No. Does it give them a pause and their armed forces a pause? Yes. And does it allow its full partner to move in during those 42 days, the United States with Israel, into a cohesive situation that targets a true enemy of freedom, liberty, and Israel and the United States, which is Tehran and Iran.
The other 2 points I would add is Israel had a great deal of trepidation when Biden put this deal on the table, because they understood, I think correctly, that once you got into phase 2, even though the deal is relatively the same in what its current terms are,
who's going to be pressured?
The Israelis would have been pressured under a Biden administration to make more concessions. And that would have been, and that's what Hamas was counting on, and that's why they wouldn't accept the deal back in May, and why the Israelis were so petrified of taking it back in May. The fact that Trump, to your point, Jesse, about the change in rhetoric, all the pressure is going to be on Hamas. There's going to be no pressure on the Israelis. And
hold on. I want to give a pause to that, because when you and I were talking before we went on air, and I pointed out that the person who's going to be, I think, the Undersecretary, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, is a guy whose whole theory is based on putting pressure on Israel.
Well, his whole theory is that there should be a 2-state solution. But I don't believe that one guy is going to overrule Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, John Ratcliffe, Donald Trump, and Pete Hegseth. So he may be an influential guy, but he's not that influential. I'm not I'd rather he not be there, but I'm not all that perturbed by it. And the other final point I would make is the Abraham Accords. We have to give Saudi Arabia some coverage. We want Saudi Arabia to enter the Abraham Accords. That is truly a revolutionary event, because that ends the Arab-Israeli conflict. That ends the international Muslim-Israeli confrontation. States like Indonesia and Malaysia and Pakistan, they're now going to be able to make peace with the Israelis, full peace, economic relations, international relations. That more than anything else will secure Israel's, will guarantee Israel's security almost more than anything else. Once we take care of the Iranian nuclear facilities,
except for one major player, and that's Erdogan in Turkey.
Well, Erdogan is a bad actor, but Turkey still has diplomatic relations with Israel. They have an embassy in Tel Aviv. They're a part of NATO that gives us a tremendous amount of leverage over them. They are not developing nuclear weapons, and they are not calling for Israel's destruction. I mean, they don't.
Erdogan said he wants to see the end of Jewish so-called occupation of
Jerusalem. So, but that's not going us. Look, he's a bad guy, but also he's not going to live forever. And there are elections in Turkey. Are they fair and free? But it's not. It's not a Jeffersonian democracy.
He's going to outlive any election.
But he's not going to be there forever. So Turkey does not pose the same threat that Iran does, and Turkey, even though it has a huge standing army, does not have Israel's trained military. Does not have their technical capabilities. Turkey would end up on the short end of that stick. Turkey does not pose the same threat to Israel as Iran and the Shiite Axis does.
Well, gentlemen, I was going to say we've solved all the world's problems, but
we always do.
But there were other places and countries I wanted to talk about. I want to get a final thought from you, Jesse. Trump just announced that he's putting pressure on Putin to make a deal on the Ukrainian matter. What are your thoughts on that to conclude this week's show?
I think that his presentation at Davos to the business community, the World Economic Forum, was a continuation of that. He has threatened additional sanctions against Putin and Russia if it does not come to the table. He has urged Ukraine to come to the table to reach another ceasefire and end this war. And even during this week at Davos, he was outlining the problem that is Russia, both economically and from a diplomatic point of view and from foreign policy. I think that the fact that he is using the big stick and this honeymoon period and to his advantage to bring peace and end these wars as best as he can, despite the fact that he's been basically left a bag of garbage to deal with here. His national security team and Marco Rubio, I believe, are fully poised to do this. Are they going to do this overnight? No. But with the power of language, the power of diplomacy, and the power to revitalize our military and not be afraid to have very direct conversations with individuals about do this or there are consequences. He's basically acting as the parent amongst a bunch of children who have been acting out.
Well said. I just want to give one final comment before we sign off in this week's show. Eric just showed me as we were speaking, we had breaking news. John Radcliffe has been confirmed as the director of the CIA, a first-rate guy.
Very good news.
Very good news for America, for national security, for world peace, and for the rule of sanity in the world.
Larry Kudlow here with an urgent warning. While we celebrate Trump's historic win, inflation continues to drain your IRA and 401k. And China is now targeting your money with a kill shot on the dollar. That's why thousands of Americans are shielding their savings with gold and contacting the experts at Colonial Metals Group. Gold has protected American wealth through every financial war. For a free 2024 gold guide that explains everything, please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908. The experts at Colonial Metals Group are the only folks I trust to help you bulletproof your wealth with gold. Go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908. That's 800-621-3908 for a free 2024 gold guide to learn how you can protect your life's work and if you qualify for a free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver right now. Freegoldguide.com/Kudlow.